Tonight, breaking news. The Prime Minister announces tough new guidelines as we fight the spread of coronavirus. Many more businesses to shut, weddings restricted, home auctions banned. What is still allowed will have the full list. All this as the death toll rises following the Sydney Harbour cruise debacle. 1 passenger dead and more than 130 now infected as pressure mounts on the state government. And is it coronavirus or the flu? How to tell if you're infected.
Live from our Sydney headquarters, this is 7 News with Mark Ferguson.
Good evening. Many more businesses are going to be forced to shut their doors in just over 24 hours' time following new emergency rules handed down by the Prime Minister tonight. It follows a meeting of the National Cabinet in Canberra. That's where Mark Riley is for us this evening. Mark, plenty of change yet again.
Quite a bit of change, Mark. The extensive changes to that list of businesses where there will be restrictions and bans effectively, which will mean that more businesses will need to close and those lines outside of Centrelink will grow. Bans on international travel, on home auctions and also open houses. Food courts in shopping centres will be closed. Markets, indoor and outdoor, although there'll be state changes on those, state restrictions on those that may allow some to be open. Beauty parlours, arcades and indoor and outdoor play centres will all be closed from midnight tomorrow. This will make much more restrictions on people's lives outside the home. Weddings will be able to go ahead, but there'll be a limit of 5 people. Funerals also will be able to proceed, but only 10 people at the funeral. Takeaway food services will continue from cafes and restaurants and also those food halls. Hairdressers and barbers will be able to remain open, but only 30-minute appointments. And also outdoor exercising in boot camps and the like, with social distancing rules remaining in place. Also, new restrictions by the Prime Minister on the way we conduct ourselves in our homes, effectively to stay at home and only go out if absolutely necessary and not to entertain at home. Let's listen to the Prime Minister.
Barbecues of lots of friends or even family, extended family coming together to celebrate, 1-year-old birthday parties and all these sorts of things. We can't do those things now. These will be significant sacrifices, I know. We've all been to those events as extended families and gatherings. And gathering together in that way, even around the large family table in the family home, when all the siblings get together and bring the kids, these are not things we can do now. All of these things present risks, and they obviously present them to the elderly members of our families as well, who we need to protect.
Mark, plenty of things closing down, but the Prime Minister seems insistent that schools must remain open, and that's despite the wishes of a number of state premiers. Yeah, there is a difference of opinion there, Mark, that's for sure. What Scott Morrison said tonight, that the medical advice remains the same, that schools can stay open. He said he'll be meeting tomorrow with teachers' unions and the Education Minister, Dan Tehan. His objective is to keep those schools open for children of all essential workers, which he defined as everybody who has a job. But he's acknowledging that most parents are now keeping their children at home. His primary objective is to keep learning going and not to have a big interruption to children's education. But he also announced new restrictions, as we said, on those weddings and funerals. Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister again.
In relation to weddings and in relation to funerals. Now, weddings can continue to be conducted where it is just the couple, the celebrant and the witnesses. That's no more than 5 people. And the 4 square metre rule has to be observed within the venue in which that's taken place. But large gatherings for weddings, sadly, won't be possible under these new arrangements. And sadly also, and I know this will be very difficult, funerals to no more than 10 persons observing the rules around the 4 square metre rule and the social distancing practices.
The Prime Minister also announced an absolute ban on overseas travel. Up to now it had been a recommendation. He said some people have been flouting that recommendation. It is now a ban and will be enforced under national security laws. He said there will also be police looking for people who are buying up products and sending them overseas on a black market. There'll be particular strike forces looking to stamp down on that. So these additional measures tonight are moving another step towards total close down of the total lockdown of Australian cities along the lines of what's happening in the UK and New Zealand. You have to imagine that we're heading that way now, and this is a big step in that direction, Mark.
Yeah, the list grows ever longer. Mark Riley in Canberra, thank you. Amber Laidler joins me now from the Top Ride Shopping Centre in Sydney. Amber, what does all this mean for workers and shoppers in places like Top Ride?
Well, Mark, included in the restrictions that come into effect from midnight tomorrow are the food courts that we see in shopping centres. Now, the individual food outlets are allowed to continue operating and selling their services, but only in a takeaway capacity. It is the tables and chairs that we see in those food courts that will now be off limits, and I expect we'll see a number of them barricaded off by Thursday morning, like we've already seen in a number of shopping centres. There are also ramifications for the real estate industry. Auctions at auction homes and open homes, they can no longer continue. Also for beauty therapy services, nails, tanning, spas and massages, wellness centres and saunas, they too are now closed. Hairdressers and barbers can continue, but they must ensure social distancing. They must limit the number of people in the room, and ideally they must ensure that every customer is in their shop for no longer than 30 minutes. For brides and grooms-to-be, weddings are allowed to continue, but only with the couple, with the celebrants and with two witnesses. Essentially, it's eloping without going anywhere. And the Prime Minister says that's because we have seen evidence of high transmission numbers at events like weddings, and they need to limit the close contact between people, Mark.
Amber, so many changes. All this is only going to add tens of thousands or more on that long list of those now seeking, or those out of a job and looking for some form of welfare.
Yes, well, how real estate agents and auctioneers continue to operate is to be seen. We have seen a number of businesses successfully move their offerings and their services into the virtual world. So whether real estate agents and auctioneers can do the same is yet to be seen. But of course, beauty therapists are the big casualties here, as are massage therapists. According to the Australian Skills and Industry Commerce, that's more than 120,000 people out of a job from midnight tomorrow. We know 88,000 jobs are gone already, and we were expecting another 200,000 in the coming weeks. These are just some of the latest casualties, Mark.
Amber Laidler, a Top Ride for us tonight. Thank you very much. A woman in her 70s has died from coronavirus after being taken off the Ruby Princess cruise ship in Sydney. As anger grows that passengers were allowed to disembark, pressure is mounting on the state government, with confirmed cases from that one ship now soaring to 133.
If there was ever a boat the government wished it had stopped, it's this one.
I do blame New South Wales Health for letting us off that boat.
And I don't care what criticism I get, throw it at me.
As the Ruby Princess hid beyond the horizon this morning, a woman in her 70s died from coronavirus in a Sydney hospital, a passenger of Australia's Ship of Shame.
When they knew that they had even suspected cases, the people being stretchered off the ship, I'm astounded they let us off.
There are now 107 confirmed cases of COVID-19 from the Ruby Princess in New South Wales alone, a further 26 interstate. In total, now 7 coronavirus deaths in New South Wales.
There was a good chunk of us who were travelling internationally.
Sydney passenger Eliza McCafferty flew to England without checks after disembarking the cruise. She has since developed coronavirus symptoms.
Fatigue. I'm sleeping so much, but then I'll have a coughing fit and it'll wake me up.
Eliza disembarked the Ruby Princess at 8:30am last Thursday, then into a hire car to Sydney Airport. After checking in, she waited in the Qantas Club lounge before boarding a packed flight QF1 for Singapore at 5pm. There was an hour changeover at Singapore Airport before the flight continued to Heathrow. Then a 50-kilometre cab ride to Reading.
It has been a colossal stuff-up. They have allowed people to just come and go.
Since they scattered off the ship here last Thursday, the ADF and other agencies have been brought in to contact trace all 2,700 passengers, not only to work out where they've been, but who they've been in contact with. For the passengers now spread across the globe, it's too little, too late.
You know, I think they're less prepared than the people in 1918.
Evan Batten, 7 News.
In a blunt warning delivered today, police will consider mobile phone tracking to ensure those in self-isolation do stay at home. The state's confirmed cases spiked dramatically last night, 149 new cases, bringing the total to 818. The national death toll now stands at 8. All this as we found individuals and businesses still breaching the new distancing rules.
Running the gauntlet. Joggers again ignoring the warnings at Bondi this morning. Jumping safety fences, dodging the signs. Here, a surf lifesaving crew literally chases one off the beach. Surfers too, waving the rules.
Are you above the rule?
I'm not above the rule.
Then why are you going in a beach that's closed?
I think it's very selfish.
If it's right for one, is it right for everybody else? They can't do that.
And here, also at Bondi, a couple and child enjoy a cafe meal, flouting the lockdown laws. At this Alexandria cafe today, our cameras caught multiple offenders dining in.
We're just trying to work out why you've got a customer here, sitting in your cafe.
The owner claimed he'd asked the customer to leave. The customer says the owner told him nothing.
Why are you sitting inside a cafe?
I'm eating lunch, man. I didn't know I had to take it out.
Well, he was sitting there right in front of you.
Yeah, I told him.
It's infuriating authorities.
New South Wales is at a critical stage in relation to the virus. We need to make sure the spread stops.
The police stepping up patrols and encouraging people to dob in offenders.
Our public order and riot squad, that if we need them, they are ready to go.
Getting tough too on those in self-quarantine, some Big Brother tracking.
Already had preliminary discussions about monitoring people's mobile phones that are in self-isolation.
Pushing privacy aside for the sake of public health.
They could even use the telco data to figure out where you are based on cell tower information.
And help us at this critical point flatten the curve.
But there are so many complaints of confusion and mixed messaging. Example, can you go for a jog if you're in self-quarantine? Here's the federal advice last night.
Quarantine means stay at home, sorry.
And the state advice this morning.
You can go out into your backyard. You can also go for a walk, but you need to stay 1.5 metres away from people and do not interact at all with anyone.
If you're looking for an example of tough corona protocols, Australian Natalie Gray and her partner have just returned to their China careers and home. Tested on the plane, again in the terminal, again outside. Then made to wait in a gymnasium for the results.
Some people got hotels to wait it out.
Before being taken by bus direct to their flat. Tested again and then allowed in.
They'll come and do our temperature every day, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Australia's system works on trust. This is Margaret Dogood in self-quarantine. We met her last week. She's now 8 days in and following the rules. We took her coffee. This was as close as I was allowed.
A bit of a fun challenge, really, to use what I've got in the place, yeah.
It could be reality for all of us soon. The Premier warning total lockdown is on the cards.
Undoubtedly, if we don't control the spread, we are looking at those options.
Chris Reason, 7 News.
This year's HSC exams will go ahead despite the crisis causing major disruptions. Provisions will be made for students who get sick with support for online lessons. Over 70% of families are now keeping children at home. The Premier today reiterated that while classrooms remain open, it's advised students should stay home. Now, as we prepare for more changes to our way of life, other countries are well ahead of us trying to adjust to their new rules. Hugh Whitfeld joins me now from London, which is waking up to its first full day under very strict lockdown measures. Hugh, what are you and locals now dealing with there?
Well, Mark, they are the biggest curtailments to public freedoms since World War II. They were announced by Boris Johnson in a very rare address to the nation from number 10 Downing Street about 12 hours ago now. Britons are being implored by the Prime Minister to stay in their homes. The only excuse you have to go outside here in the UK is to go shopping for one form of exercise a day, to travel to and from work, but only if that work is considered essential. And gatherings of more than 2 people will be broken up, and the police have the power to enforce these new rules. The Prime Minister saying you should not meet your friends. If your friends ask to meet, you should say no.
Without a huge national effort to halt the growth of this virus, there will come a moment when no health service in the world could possibly cope, because there won't be enough ventilators, enough intensive care beds, enough doctors and nurses.
The British government was essentially forced to act after seeing scenes of packed tubes in London and busy parks and markets over the weekend here. The issue is that most of the tube services have been reduced because there are fewer people going into offices in the city, but those people who do need to go to work, especially health workers and builders, construction sites, are still allowed to continue operating. They are cramming onto the few tubes that are left, and obviously that means that all of those people are flouting social distancing rules. So it's a difficult job for the British government to get the messaging right now. Some people are allowed to go to work, others are not. There is confusion in the last couple of hours about whether or not children who live between two different parents can move between those two different homes. Many people waiting on the government to clarify those issues, but certainly the restrictions here in the UK are far more draconian than what even was just announced by Scott Morrison a short time ago. Mark.
Hopefully a much quieter day in central London today. Hugh, thank you. It is a crucial question. Do you have coronavirus, or is it just a cold or the flu? It can be hard to tell in the first few days of infection, but there are differences, as 7's Melissa Doyle explains.
Well, at first you may think it is just a common cold, and it could be, but COVID-19 can escalate rapidly. Here is what it looks like if you have it. According to the World Health Organization, around 80% of coronavirus cases are considered mild to moderate. 14% are severe and 6% are critical. To be clear, even a mild case of COVID-19 is not like a cold. The symptoms will still be debilitating, but most won't need oxygen. For a severe case, you will need supplemental oxygen. Critical cases require life support. Now, in the first few days of showing symptoms, it can be hard to tell whether you have COVID-19 or just a cold or a flu. And that's because at first the viruses share many of the same symptoms. 88% of COVID-19 patients present with a fever and a dry cough. And if that sounds similar to a flu, that is because it is. However, with a flu, you will likely also experience muscle pain and a headache. And these symptoms are rarely seen in coronavirus patients. But the best way of determining whether you have COVID-19 is to think about where you have been recently. Have you been overseas or been in contact with someone who has? If you're concerned you have the virus, you can call the 24/7 coronavirus hotline or phone your GP. And as always, if it's an emergency, go straight to hospital.
Coming up on 7 News, the real estate sector set to be crippled by the new coronavirus rules. We'll have all the latest on what that means for you. Why the crisis in Italy is showing the first signs of slowing down. And the NRL steps in with a bold plan to save clubs. Welcome back. You're watching a special late edition of 7 News. This was the Harbour Bridge tonight at peak hour. Traffic flowing freely. Once a rare sight for our city on a weeknight, now the new normal. Returning to our top story tonight, and the Prime Minister has announced new measures to battle the coronavirus pandemic. Among those, real estate auctions and open house inspections to be banned. I'm joined now by Network Finance Editor Gemma Acton. Gemma, just how damaging will this be for the real estate industry?
Well, Mark, clearly this is a significant blow for the industry. There are around 2,000 auctions scheduled for the next couple of weekends before we get into the Easter break. Clearly not all of those will go ahead. Now, when I say not all of those will go ahead, that's because we should see some of them shifting online. This clearly hasn't come completely out of the blue. Even towards the end of February, when I was speaking to estate agents, they were saying they're already seeing some people reluctant to look around open houses, come to auctions. So this is something they've been preparing for the last couple of weeks and actively been encouraged to look into online technology, which I'm told has actually improved enormously over the last year. Nonetheless, clearly still a blow, and a blow in general to the overall industry. So many concerns here about how coronavirus plays out. We're seeing many landlords be asked to offer rent relief. We've seen in the UK that evictions have been banned until the national emergency is over, and many people calling on the government here for more of those type of measures here.
And Gemma, not just those working in the industry, but anyone who is thinking of selling a property, maybe not just next week, but months down the track.
Yes, look, I just spoke to a couple of people in the industry since this announcement came out, and the impression I got is they still think there will be some motivated sellers and some motivated buyers. Certainly, given the distress a lot of people have suddenly found themselves in, we probably will be seeing some motivated sellers who will want to go ahead no matter what, and that will probably require online auctions now. But yes, certainly anybody who doesn't trust the technology or doesn't have to get involved will probably take a step back for the time being.
OK, Gemma, thank you very much. The SBS Sydney newsroom was evacuated today after a staff member tested positive for coronavirus. It's believed the employee was last in the Artarmon building on Friday, and due to social distancing practices, the broadcaster says that person likely had minimal contact with other workers, though some have been told to self-isolate for 14 days. Cleaners were called in to sanitise the building, the upheaval forcing SBS to shift their news operations to Canberra. Despite intense lockdowns, the virus continues to ravage populations across Europe. But in Italy, there are the first glimpses of hope that the crisis may be easing.
In Spain this evening, clear evidence the virus crisis is spiralling out of control. Patients lie on hallway floors in hospitals, no beds left. A cautionary tale of how COVID-19 can quickly overwhelm even modern healthcare systems. The death toll here now over 2,000. But the faintest of hints of a brighter future in hard-hit Italy. For the second day in a row, the daily death toll is tapering off. But it's a bitter victory to claim. 600 people died last night. The fact that number is the same as the days before is now what passes for progress in the European nation. In China, where the virus first broke out, a different threat, recontagion. The country says it has no new domestic cases, but now fears it could get a second wave from the outside, so it's diverting all incoming passengers to Beijing to screening centres. This video shows passengers being marched off a flight before being taken to one of the facilities, little more than a repurposed hotel staffed by doctors in full hazmat gear, taking no chances as China attempts to steer clear of a second storm growing on the horizon. Christian Gupset, 7 News.
As we ramp up our lockdown laws, the United States could soon go the other way. President Trump is considering ignoring his medical advisors and scaling back social distancing measures.
We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem. This was a medical problem. We are not going to let it turn into a long-lasting financial problem.
The declaration flies in the face of advice from the World Health Organization. Despite this, the President could roll back social distancing measures as early as next week. Now in sport, the NRL has stepped in to save the future of its clubs, with each set to receive $1.2 million a month for the next 3 months to keep them afloat.
But that will mean a reset of the cost base. All of us, me included, the NRL staff, all our clubs, coaches and players, we're going to have to rethink about the costs across the game as we go through a very, very difficult time in the game's history.
Clubs say the most realistic chance of the season resuming this year isn't until September. This morning, the A-League became the last major sporting competition to be suspended here in Australia. Last night, the Newcastle Jets defeated Melbourne City 2-1 in Newcastle, but everyone in the game already knew what was coming next.
FFA has taken a very difficult and tough decision to postpone the final rounds to be a responsible citizen and help the Australian community and support the efforts to slow down the spread of the virus.
They'll assess their situation in late April. A senior Olympics power broker has confirmed the Tokyo Games won't proceed this year. IOC member Dick Pound told a US newspaper the Games definitely won't go ahead in July. For 2016 gold medal winner Chloe Esposito, the postponement couldn't be better timing.
I'll have the baby, see how we go, but it's definitely got my mind ticking over now.
Due to give birth in August, the modern pentathlon champ had originally ruled herself out of the 2020 Games. With world sport on hold, maybe here's a bold step into the future. Don't let your eyes deceive you. This is not the Bahrain Formula One Grand Prix, but a virtual esports version. With the first 8 races of the season already suspended, F1 officials hoped all drivers would participate. Only 2 did, so the field was filled with past drivers, F1 fans, and lucky computer game tragics from other sports and entertainment.
What can Jimmy Broadbent do? Oh no! And they've taken each other out at the end!
A Renault test driver won the race. Supercars will run a similar series with all regular drivers starting next month. Still to come in 7 News, David Brown will have a look at tomorrow's weather. Welcome back. Time to check the weather now. David Brown has the forecast. How's tomorrow looking, Brownie?
Thanks, Fergo. A few brief showers today and rather cool conditions. Rain is expected to unfold tomorrow. As we go to the latest satellite data, we can see some isolated shower activity to the north. Got areas of rain and storms passing through southern areas at the moment. It's all associated with this trough. In fact, as we go to the forecast chart, the system is expected to intensify as it gradually heads towards the coastal fringe tomorrow. Check out the areas of rain. Of course, the thunderstorms are entering the mix, especially to the northern part of our state. Over the capitals tomorrow, well, sunshine in Brisbane, warm too, around 27 degrees. A little bit cooler in Melbourne. It will be cloudy around 18. As for Perth, yes, it's another burst of summer-like heat. Forecast top there of around 35 degrees. Statewide, we'll see areas of rain and scattered thunderstorms moving through tomorrow. You'll notice most of the activities across the northern half of our state. I think we'll see some good falls along the northern ranges and also the adjoining western slopes. Back home, cloud increasing tomorrow. This is the forecast for your Wednesday. Rain, most of it sweeping in during the afternoon. Some good, steady, soaking falls are likely. Temperatures much like today. And of course, that includes the city with our forecast top of around 23 degrees. We're dropping down to 17 overnight. As for the next 7 days, more rain on Thursday, the rain easing to a few showers during the afternoon. As for Friday, just a shower or two, and it looks like this unsettled weather will continue into the weekend. That's the latest weather for now. Fergo.
Righto, David, thank you. Now, we've witnessed plenty of disturbing scenes of panic buying in supermarkets across Sydney and beyond in the past few weeks. But now Aussie farmers are speaking out, urging people to stop, saying there's more than enough food to go around.
This paddock alone should grow enough wheat to make 2.25 million loaves of bread. That equates to 22 million of these Vegemite sandwiches. Another paddock over there, we're going to plant barley. And that paddock alone should grow enough barley to make 23.5 million cans of beer.
Nice work, Farmer Sam. That's all being grown right here in Australia, produce that will end up on your supermarket shelves, so no need to panic buy. And that is 7 News for now. Sunrise will be back with the very latest developments from 5:30 in the morning. I'm Mark Ferguson from all the team. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night.